you want to make sure that first and foremost, the application of AI in your environment makes sense. We don't want a solution to go chase a problem. We want to find a problem that has the right solution being AI.
Hello and welcome to Care to Lead. Today's guest is someone we all need to hear. Jason Rebholz is the Chief Information Security Officer at Corvus Insurance, a cyber insurance carrier, and we all need cyber insurance today. Jason has spent a career responding to hacks and helping companies defend their networks. That is just so important, Jason, and I thank you for being here and talking to us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So with the number of hacks that we're seeing in the news, what can we predict about the impact that AI is going to have on cybercrime?
It's a really interesting topic right now because we are at the peak of what I call the fear, uncertainty, and doubt cycle with cybersecurity. And so there are a lot of concerns over the impact AI is going to have on cybersecurity, and some of those are founded. But what we're seeing is that a lot of exaggerations are happening right now. I think the state of the matter right now is threat actors are looking at certain types of artificial intelligence, specifically Gen AI, to help facilitate certain parts of the attack, but we're not seeing a widespread adoption. And I don't think we're going to see that for another couple of years. But that doesn't mean we have to take our eye off the bat here, because we need to make sure that we're preparing for it. The good news is that a lot of the things that we've been doing to protect against cyber attacks today are still going to be relevant even in the face of AI. It's just going to build a new awareness. And I think that what we really need to focus on, especially this year, is what is the role that Gen AI is going to play in disinformation? Because we can see the impact that's going to have on the upcoming elections in the US, and it's only going to spiral out of control from there. And so it's just a different door for AI to come in and really cause a lot of disruption, but it's almost adjacent to what we would see in the traditional type of cyber attack, but it's still under the cybersecurity umbrella.
There's like just a lot of really good nuggets in there that I want to try to unpack. So one of the first ones that I want to, I don't know where to start. I want to get into the political one and the misinformation. And I also want to get into what I notice as an executive coach when I'm working with executives and I'm working in organizations and they're excited about AI and they're terrified of AI. Not terrified of what it can do, but like what can they use it for without like privacy issues? If I throw in data so that it can sort through data, where's that data going? And who has access to it? And am I setting my customers up for whatever? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's really interesting right now because you have a lot of organizations that are out there that they're saying, hey, if I don't get on this AI bandwagon, I'm going to get left behind.
And they're right.
And so it's like, we have to do something, right? And so what's really interesting there is, yes, you can do something. Should you do something is a completely different matter, because you want to make sure that first and foremost, the application of AI in your environment makes sense. We don't want a solution to go chase a problem. We want to find a problem that has the right solution being AI. And so I had a really interesting conversation with a company the other day where, they were in a similar boat. We have to do something. We don't want to be left behind. We were concerned our competitors are going to be doing it. And so I said, listen, I've seen a lot of organizations go and invest a lot of money early on, even just in the last year, into different, chatbots and things like that. And there was no real emphasis on what are we really trying to do here other than have an AI feature. And what I found was that a lot of companies were just wasting money. And so there's a component of this where it's fine to experiment with it and see what it's good for, but there's a magical moment that happens when you find that problem where you say, this is the perfect opportunity to bring in AI to help augment us and make things easier. And so, one of the examples that I saw in this recent conversation was they have a backlog of content and they need to go through and tag it. What category does it belong in? it's the perfect thing for a large language model where it can go in and read all this information and apply a summary or just a tag to it. And that's going to save hundreds, if not thousands of man hours for this organization. And so that is something where it's a very clear cause and effect when you're applying AI as a solution, and they're going to see really good results from that and set themselves up for the future. And now they can really say, hey, we have an AI powered feature that's, actually adding value and not being a distraction or just a gimmick.
So organizations can also use AI to help with productivity in a lot of ways. But then again, that's where I'm seeing people be a little bit hesitant about what they put in. If you're working on something, like for me, for example, I can go in and I can say to AI or to ChatGPT, I'm creating a workshop on this. These are my topics. This is what I'm covering. These are the things. Please create my facilitator's guide. And it'll just put everything in a table form. And I have a facilitator's guide that would have taken me maybe 3 hours. Now it takes me 30 seconds. But I'm putting all the information in. So if a client is trying to put all their information in about whatever they're working on, there's a lot of fear in where that information's going. So is it helping with my productivity, or is it selling out my company by putting information out there?
Yeah, it's one of those things when you put that information in there, you really need to treat it like any other third party. If you're putting that information into there, you have to assume that somebody else is going to be able to use that for their own purposes. Now, the general guidance that I typically give is, if there's something that you don't want to be out there publicly, don't put it in there in the first place. Because even though it's unlikely that that data will be exposed and linked back to you, you are just helping another company train their data better, and then that's going to help other companies meet you where you are, right? But when I look at a lot of these things like ChatGPT, a lot of what it is, it's a race to average, right? Because even though there's really good information that it's getting trained on, there's also a lot of bad information that it's getting trained on. And so your company's information, hopefully it's in the upper tier of good quality information, but it's just going to get mixed in there, right? But that doesn't mean you shouldn't, just offer it up because it's kind of hidden in obscurity. It just really means take a really careful approach here, that if you're not willing to put this in the newspaper on, what the data is, just don't upload that. And we're seeing a time now where the technology is evolving so quickly that you're in a position where you can create your own models that you don't have to share that information. And so this is something where if you just wait a couple weeks, everything is going to change anyway. And so, you can really take a more intentional approach versus, really thinking, hey, if I don't do something in the next 3 days, I'm toast. I'm going to miss out. And so this is where it's just, slow down, think through it, and, just do it smartly. This is not anything that we haven't seen before in the sense of, I'm giving my data to a third party. How would I want to treat that data accordingly?
And that reminds me of something I say to people that are looking to change career. Well, even if they're not looking to change careers, never post anything on social media that you don't want your interviewer at your next job to see, right? So I guess you're saying kind of the same thing.
Exactly. It's interesting too with that comment, because you have this race right now too, just in general networking, where people are posting more and more and more. And so does that change how much people are willing to share publicly? Maybe, right? But I think to your point before, people are going to automatically go towards convenience. And I think that's okay, because we have to assume, hey, if I can save 3 hours, it's probably worth it. And for the majority of use cases, it's going to be okay, right? Your data is probably not going to get leaked. It's probably not going to be a company-ending event, but if you're constantly doing that, and there's a few examples that are out there of certain things that have leaked and have been able to be traced back to certain companies, we're still seeing edge cases like that. But the moral of the story here is we are still in the first inning of AI and everything that's happening. And so, to be candid, we're guessing right now at what a lot of the risks are. We're postulating because we haven't seen enough time go by where we can actually see these things materialize.
That's cool. Your interest in all of this kind of started because you like to solve problems. Tell me about the Rubik's Cube.
Yeah, it's funny because I always tell people that my career really started with a Rubik's Cube. And so I was in high school. I was a nerd in high school, still am. And so I was on the debate team, and I was on a bus. We were doing, I think it was a mock trial at Princeton. And there was somebody who was visiting, and I saw him on this bus speed solving a Rubik's Cube. And I was like, this has got to be one of the smartest people I have ever seen. And so I got really curious and started asking questions. And he was telling me stories about how he had just gone to Disney World to compete in the national speed solving competitions for Rubik's Cube. And so I just became fascinated with it. And so I started doing a lot of research on it, seeing how do you speed solve. And I started to learn how to do it. And I got my most of my computer science class in high school interested in it. And I was teaching people how to do this. And what I really found was that when I have a really juicy problem in front of me, it's just how I focus down. And I just want to do everything I can to try to solve that. And so that led into this just general interest in problem solving. And as I was starting to figure out what did I want to go to college for, it was the same time that I was learning how to speed solve Rubik's Cubes. And just through happenstance with conversations with my high school teacher, he said, hey, you should check out this computer networking thing. And so I was doing some research on that and I stumbled into the security aspect of it. And to me, it was, this is a major problem. And there are so many different avenues that people can hack into companies. You know, one, how do you hack into a company? And then two, how do you stop somebody from hacking into a company? And so this became my life's Rubik's Cube of how do I solve this problem? And that was just that kickstarted my career in security. And I've been following that path ever since.
Oh, that's fun. And it kind of reminds me of that 13-year-old who just beat Tetris. Did you see that?
I did, yeah. Yeah, where he crashed the game because he got so far.
And so I'm be real curious to see where he is in 10 years from now.
Right. It's when I recruit people who are straight out of college. Like these are the little things that I look for because it's that just passion and that curiosity and that real interest in if I have something I've never seen before in front of me, how do I problem solve? Those are life skills that are really hard to teach. And so it's just that kind of innate ability and kind of interest that I think really becomes rocket fuel for people.
So larger organizations have a lot more resources and ability to protect themselves and have insurance and firewalls and all of this. But some of the smaller companies, medical practices, or, the smaller companies don't. What advice do you have for them?
So, first off, we have to recognize that it's not a fair fight. You have half the budget, or a fraction of the budget that a lot of these larger corporations do, but you do have an advantage. You have the ability to have a more simplified environment, which gives you more control over the decisions you make. And so this is where you have an opportunity as a small company to stick to the basics and do the basics really well. Because in most of the attacks that I've seen throughout my entire career, it's just a series of mistakes or gaps that are relatively straightforward and minor, but they add up over time. And so when I look at any small company, what I'm looking at is if you have nothing, if you're starting from scratch, or you're really just starting your security journey, how are you protecting your online accounts? That's a big target of hackers today. So are you using things like password management or managers where you can have a unique password everywhere? Are you enforcing multi-factor authentication everywhere? These are small barriers that really help stop a lot of these attacks that are out there. And when you shift from there, then it's how do you protect the endpoint? The endpoint being the laptop, the iPad, the desktop, the servers that are really running all of your IT environment. And so you want to make sure that you're putting things like antivirus or more sophisticated technology called endpoint detection and response, which is just, I would say it's antivirus on steroids. It's really designed, purpose-built to really identify and block a lot of the advanced malware that's out there. And then from there, the world operates on email. So we need to make sure that we're getting eyes and security around that. And if you can get those three things, those are the basics, then you can really focus on, okay, now that I got some protections in place, how do I build a resilient environment? You have to assume that there's going to be something bad that's going to happen. It's almost like you're building a house in a hurricane. And so how do you build it with concrete ahead of time so that you can withstand the wind changes that are going to be happening? And that's going to give you more of a fighting chance to really ward off an attack or at least mitigate the total severity, how big that attack can be.
Mm-hmm. I was having trouble with a printer one time, and I got on a website. I Googled like Hewlett Packard or whatever it was, and I clicked on the first thing that came up. It wasn't Hewlett Packard, but I thought it was. And I got on and I let them share my screen and gave them my credit card. I think I spent like $500 because they had to put this fix into my printer. I realized way too late that I wasn't talking to Hewlett Packard. I just had somebody on my computer that I just gave permission to be there. It was like so stupid. But I mean, it's so easy to do because you think you're talking to Hewlett Packard because it's right above them in the Google search.
Exactly. And this is why I said before, it's not a fair fight, right? This is somebody that spends 10 to 12 hours a day finding people to do exactly what they did to you, right? And so this is where I feel in our industry, the cybersecurity industry, there's a lot of blaming that happens, right? We blame the victim that, oh, I can't believe you fell for that. How did you not know that? How did you do this? It's like the average person who's not in technology, why would they know that?
Right.
It's just not their world. And so this is where, it's a really difficult problem to solve at scale because you have a threat actor that is literally spending every waking hour that they possibly can to just source as many victims as they can. And they're good at it. They have a good script. They know what they're doing.
500 there, they're making gazillions of dollars. And those of us non-technical people are just going, oh, wow.
Exactly. Yeah. And I was just reading a report the other day. The FBI had put this out. I think it was last year. In the last 10 years, there have been $50 billion of losses tied just to phishing emails. And that's just what was reported to the FBI. And I think it was 10 billion of that was in 2022 alone. We're seeing a sharp increase because, you know what, with a little bit of training that these attackers can do and they get a couple reps in, there are plenty of victims out there that they can go after. And so this is good money for them. So why would they stop?
So that brings me back to something else you started with in your opening conversation, what is disinformation and misinformation. There is just so much. I mean, just so much. TikTok, which I'm not even, thank goodness, on that one. But I mean, you look at all these different social media platforms. How is a person supposed to know if what they're saying is real? Because it could be such a deep fake video. I mean, it's terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer, and it's not a good answer, is
we can't.
It's really hard, right? And to give you a measure of how difficult this is, you have OpenAI, who really opened the door with ChatGPT and everything that it can do with Gen AI. They actually stopped a program that they had started to try to automatically identify what content was artificially created. That is a company that their specialty is creating this information, and even they're struggling to solve that problem. So that unfortunately means from a technology perspective, it doesn't put anyone in a good position to be able to decipher what's real and what's not. And so the unfortunate answer here is patience, right? How do we slow down, which is hard for anyone in society, slow down and say, hey, is this information real? Does it, start with a logical check. Does this logically make sense? Maybe start there. And then let me try to cross-validate this, right? And so I find myself, whenever I'm looking at information, because I fell prey to the first big one was the Pope who was wearing that one puffer jacket. And in that scenario, I was like, oh, wow, that's so weird that, the Pope is doing this. And then I'm like, oh, that's fake. And that was the first inclination for me. I was like, we have a problem here as a society because this was only the beginning. And so for me, I try to just say, okay, let me step back, slow down a little bit. And if something feels weird, I'm going to cross-check this with a couple different sources. And I think, unfortunately, that's where we're going to have to live for a little bit. I'm sure in the future, there's going to be new technology that can come out and help validate some of these things. But the onus is on the individual at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw an ad within a couple of weeks that said, stop doing your own training videos. You can make a deep fake of yourself to do your work for you, and no one will know it's not you. And I'm thinking, I'm not sure that that's a good thing. Like, it's really cool, and it sounds like, you can duplicate yourself on Instagram. You can do your own training videos and not have to put in the work. But if it's that easy for someone without a lot of experience to do, just imagine what the pros are able to do.
Exactly. And this is where, too, I just look at all of the different people that are starting to push content out there is how do you validate an expert? I was having a really interesting conversation the other day on, with LinkedIn, because I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I see some people there where, they're a couple years out of school and they're being touted as cybersecurity experts. And I'm looking at this data that they're putting out. I was like, that is factually incorrect. When you have hundreds of people who are validating it themselves without understanding what they're clicking like to, it's creating this just, really scary cycle of what is truth. And, as somebody who is, as an expert in your field, how do you try to get the truth out based on experience versus just, how quickly somebody can post something on social media?
Yeah, I laugh sometimes because I get every single day, like, we can get you, $30,000 a month in new clients. And we're like, okay. So it just out of curiosity, sometimes I'll look at the profile of the person who sent it to me. And like 2 months ago, they were renting cars for enterprise.
Yeah.
It's like you're not this person. It is scary what people put themselves out there as having experience in, and that's not even with AI. That's just people making themselves try to. Ugh, it's
Exactly.
terrible.
And I think that it's just one of those things where if you're in people's periphery, they're just going to see you. And I think there's this automatic trust that gets created based on volume versus the quality of what, the content is, or what they're saying. And so AI is going to fuel that even more. That's where, again, as a society, we got to really step back. We have to raise the bar, right? It is not okay to be okay with this average that is getting created. How do we know what the source truth is? And, I think we just have to demand more of ourselves to say, you know what, I want to make sure that I am getting the right pieces of information, that I am getting the highest quality information, because otherwise we're going to see a race to the bottom of just, average information, which is great because it'll lift a lot of people up, which is fantastic. But how do we then continue to raise the bar as a society so that we can continue to drive innovation and not just rely on the technology to do that for us? Because I'm not a big AI fear person, but at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we're in a position where we can take control of this and really continue to drive the innovation that it's going to help everybody win at the end of the day.
Which countries, from your experience, which countries have the most guardrails set up for this kind of stuff, if any?
China is probably the one that has the most guardrails, largely because they have essentially made it illegal and shut off access to a lot of the technologies that are out there today, including OpenAI. And so they are really trying to they're trying to take the approach of owning it themselves in-house, right? And like their own technologies. That's more of a let's try to control the populace.
Yeah, that's different than guardrails.
Yeah, those are very strong guardrails. Outside of that, I think you're going to have pockets of, I don't want to even call them activists, right? But it's just people who are really thinking smartly about this and, the direction we need to go. And I think that's really a global movement of let's make sure we're doing this the right way.
Mm-hmm. What's your advice to an organization? Like, how do you protect yourself? Where do you see the biggest threats? Do you see the biggest threats being from those, someone hacking your system? Or do you see the biggest threats being you inadvertently doing something?
I have a bit of a biased view because, working at a cyber insurance carrier and really growing up in an industry where people are getting hacked every day, that's what I see. And, when I see that, I see companies that are going down because of ransomware, where they can't fulfill their online orders, where, they can't take on new clients because all of their systems have been shut down. And so we're seeing ransomware continue to increase in frequency and in severity. And so I think for any organization, you have to start there because that is a tangible impact on your business. Then we can start getting into these kind of more fringe things, which are more, let's protect our data, right? Let's make sure that we have good guidelines on using AI. Let's make sure that we have good guidelines on how we're sharing data back and forth, not only with, AI companies, but also just your third parties. And because those are the things that you're extending your own perimeter, if you will, to other companies. It's 10, 15 years ago, you were building a castle to try to protect your organization. And now, because of convenience and just the features that all of these different online applications have, that castle model doesn't work anymore. Everything is out there, and you're trying to protect boundaries that you don't even have control over.
I was a Norton antivirus or Norton something is supposed to protect everything. And I have it. I think I still pay for it, but I stopped using it because it was so frustrating. I'd get have my laptop, I'd get to the airport, I sit down in the lounge, I want to work, and it is blocking everything. I can't get into anything. I'm like, I I have to be able to use my stuff. What's the one you recommend to protect me, but still let me into my stuff?
This is the biggest challenge with cybersecurity, right? It's a lot of security experts, they operate in a world where the only way we can protect a user is to lock down everything to the point where it's not usable.
That's where it worked for me.
Yeah, and that just it's not realistic. Like if you're playing that game as a security expert, you're going to lose. Because at the end of the day, security is a balance between functionality and security. And you have to find that balance. And so for the average user, and this is, companies have a different game they're playing, right? They need to go and pay for some really good software. But for the average user, if you're running a Windows machine, the Windows built in, yeah, you're shaking your head. For Windows, their built-in AV is pretty good, and they have invested a lot of money to make it good. Now, if you're using a Mac also has built-in antivirus, and it's pretty good, and they do a good job of trying to defend against it. And so I think we're in this stage right now that for most users, the defaults that are there are good. But if you're more concerned about it, there are other options that are out there. I don't want to get behind one in particular, but it's really about, I focus more on how do I protect my passwords? Am I using a password manager?
Like LastPass. Do you something like LastPass? Is that
LastPass, 1Password, Bitwarden? There's so many options that are out there. And if you're using something like that, so that you're using unique passwords, if you're using MFA on your websites, those are the things that are really important to make sure that you're protecting. And then if you're looking at more security for your endpoint, I think most of the solutions that are out there are okay. If there's malware that's bypassing it, what I really always default back to is how am I securing my accounts? How am I securing my identity? And how can I really see if somebody does steal all of this data that I can quickly identify that and react to it so I can reduce that blast radius of the damage?
My website was hacked one time, maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and whenever someone would type in my website, it went to a porn site.
Oh, jeez.
And it wasn't even a classy porn site. It was a really trashy porn site. And that was with GoDaddy. They fixed it really quickly, but it was this isn't good. So I mean it, and my website, I've got no data on it. I'm a small company. I'm a nice company, but I'm not UPMC or something huge. So I'm not really worth hacking, but still it's out there. So if somebody's going to hack a website like mine, I can imagine what they're trying to do with Nike and, the big guys.
Exactly. And I think that's a common myth out there is that you have to be a target of somebody intentionally to get hacked. And it's just not the case because these hackers are opportunistic. They're looking for any victim that's possibly out there because no matter the scenario, there's a playbook to make some money, right? And so, in that website example, right, they're probably trying to drive some traffic to their website and get some ad revenue, right? And that's just all these things that, you know what? They don't care. It's a victimless crime to them, right? A faceless crime because they're just trying to make a buck here or there. And so they're just scanning the internet, looking for anything that might be vulnerable, and then they're going to take advantage of that.
So who should buy insurance? You work for an insurance company for cyber attacks. What kinds of companies should buy insurance?
Really, any company that is using a computer and some IT systems, they should really consider cyber insurance. Whether you're, a super large corporation or if you're a small business. Because at the end of the day, because these attacks are, agnostic in who they're targeting, everybody is at risk of having some sort of attack happen to them. And so the biggest thing is you don't want to get caught flat-footed where even as a small company, if your systems get encrypted or they go down, how are you going to respond? And if that's your lifeline of, financial income, that's a problem. And so these insurance companies exist to help get you back to where you were as quickly as possible. It's not just the financial reimbursement. It's about that guidance and that expertise to help walk you through these cyber attacks.
Yeah, that was my next question, because I think there is like a rider or something like that on my business insurance and my husband's business insurance that you get X amount of dollars for cyber attacks. But those dollars are useless if you don't know how to undo or fix the mess.
Exactly. And that's where, like, for small businesses, you have these business insurance packages that really, they do it all for you, right? And so one is make sure you know what you're buying, right? Make sure you're double checking. Do you have a cyber insurance as part of your insurance?
Mhm.
And then how do you use it when you need it, right? And a lot of times that's, let me shoot an email over to the insurance company, or even, work with the broker that you bought it through if you didn't go direct for something. That's, you don't want to be scrambling in the last minute to figure out how do you get back up and running when you're
Mhm.
paying for this insurance in the first place.
Gotcha. So, what is your biggest piece of advice that you would want our listeners to walk away from this conversation?
So I think the biggest thing is, we're staring at a precipice right now on where AI is going to take us. And so it's not a time where we have to panic. It's a time where we can really step back and think thoughtfully through how do we try to address the security risks moving forward? Because we had a similar situation when the internet was created and we sprinted to get this functionality up and running. And we've been spending years and years and years trying to figure out security after the fact. And so, how can we try to really think through this now for an organization, as a society, to make sure that we're taking the right steps ahead of time, so that we're not paying on the back end of trying to reverse engineer this and figure out how do we do this securely when we have that chance to do it now.
What advice do you have for leaders who have teams of employees in their organization, to how do they best educate and inform their workforce to be vigilant and protected, and not just think, well, the IT department's got us covered?
Yeah, security is a team sport, right? And so whether we're talking about AI or we're talking about just general cyber attacks that are out there, the best thing you can do is just keep an eye out. And this is, if you see it's like, the airport messages. If you see something, say something, right? Security teams are not going to get mad if you accidentally click on a link in a phishing email, right? That's just the cost of doing business. But what really helps make their jobs easier is letting them know, because then that can they can get ahead of it and say, oh, great. Okay, let's figure out what happened. We'll contain this. And then you can go on about your job.
Excellent. And how could our listeners find you?
So I am very active on LinkedIn. So I'd encourage you to follow me on LinkedIn. And I also do a security newsletter every weekend. It's called the Weekend Bite. So I'd encourage you to subscribe to that and just learn more about cybersecurity.
I actually think that's a good idea. Was something like that topic on a weekend, because people are just like chilling out and they're away from their day-to-day stuff, so they don't put it aside. That's actually pretty smart.
Exactly. Yeah. And my whole mission is, how do you simplify cybersecurity so that anyone can understand it? Because you know what? It's like a lot of the true crime podcasts that are out there. Like, these are really interesting stories that are just fun to kind of learn about. But there's always something that you can take away to protect your own security in your personal life, as well as for your organization.
So, all right, I know that was my last question, but I thought of one thing when you said that. What do you think about like the air tags that follow your stuff around? Are those safe or unsafe?
A lot of this it's as safe as your security on your account behind them, right? So this is where I would make sure that for, your Apple account, or if you're, anything that's tying back to it, make sure that you're using a strong password, unique, and that you have it's called phishing resistant MFA in place. That is going to put you in a really good position to be able to use, the convenience of that, but not introduce as much risk to it as well.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere where there was risk on those because like people that wanted to follow people were dropping them into their stuff and following people. So you can't do anything about that. That's not a cyber issue. That's a crazy person issue.
Yeah. That's a whole nother can of worms there.
So is there anything that you'd like to add for the listeners, or we'll find you on LinkedIn. We'll have all your links with the podcast and with the article so that people can find you. You're just a wealth of information. So I genuinely appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's been great to chat with you.
So as we wrap up another episode, always remember that leaders who care to lead. For more insights from leaders who can, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can listen and find Care to Lead wherever you get your podcast. Thank you very much.